This episode of the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour is sponsored by the law offices of Alfred Guillaume III, a boutique criminal defense firm located in Washington, D.C. The firm specializes in defending federal criminal cases. You can learn more about the firm by visiting our website at guillaumelaw.com. That's GUILLAUME law.com. Attorney Rizwan Rizzy Quereshi is a Washington, D.C. based partner at the global law firm Reed Smith. Rizzy's practice areas include white-collar criminal defense, securities enforcement, internal investigations, and related civil litigation. Rizzy honed his trial skills as a federal prosecutor for the District of Columbia, where he rose quickly in the ranks to serve in both senior roles in the Violent and Repeat Offender Unit as well as the Cybercrime Section. He's a Philadelphia native, a proud graduate of the Howard University School of Law, and as a true Howard man, Rizzy is actively engaged in many social justice and civil rights initiatives. He's taken a special interest in criminal justice reform. This was one great interview. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. Welcome to the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. Welcome to another episode of the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. I am honored and excited that my friend, attorney Rizwan Quereshi, and let me just say something. I never called him Rizwan a day in his life. I've known him a long time. Also known as Rizzy Quereshi, is here in the studio. How you doing, my brother?
I'm doing great, man. Good to be here. And you've never called me that before.
I've never.
Please don't ever call me that again.
It feels really weird saying Rizwan, but that's your name.
That is my name.
Also known as Rizzy, the one and only Philadelphia sports fanatic.
Fanatic. I am a fanatic, yes.
Right. And we're going to talk about that. But before we get into that, just for those of us who may not know who you are a former federal prosecutor, current defense attorney, criminal defense attorney, working at one of the premier firms in Washington, D.C. Can you tell us a little bit about your path there, the name of your firm, and what you're doing now? Just really briefly.
Sure. I'm a partner in the D.C. office of Reed Smith, which is a global law firm. We have 30 plus offices around the world. It's a full service law firm that started, 150 years ago in Pittsburgh, PA. But my practice is white collar criminal defense and government investigations. So it's a combination of representing corporate clients and officers, directors, celebrities, and DOJ, SEC, congressional investigations and the like.
So you are the fancy version of me, basically.
I don't think I could be
the
as fancy
and rich version of
Look at that
me.
jacket. How could I be fancier than that?
Shout out to my tailor, Miss Lee, Georgetown Alterations.
Shout out to all the tailors.
I love you. No, hey, man, I'm so glad that you're here, and I'm so interested to talk to you about a number of topics. And one of the things that I try to stay away from in the show are public events or points of controversy. The show is more about my guests and who they are, what's their story, which we're going to get into in a moment. But I'm not going to tell you what or who it is. But before we go, I would like to discuss something that's been in the news lately, because I've been getting a lot of Instagram messages, emails, calls about this. And I think you are one of the few unique guests that we can actually talk about. You probably already know where I'm going, but I'm just want to say
I know where you're going, and I'm ready to do it. I mean, as you know, I love talking politics, but this is a different kind of show, and I'm not trying to violate the rules.
But wait, no, there's no rules, man. There's no rules at all. It's whatever you want it to be. But I really want to, before we get into all that stuff, talk about your story. You are a proud graduate of Howard University School of Law, HU.
You know.
And for those of us who are watching the podcast, they can see that, well, first of all, besides being a Philadelphia sports fanatic, you're also another type of fanatic, which they can see from your shirt is a Wu-Tang fanatic.
Woo, yeah.
Just like me. And, when we get to part 2 of our interview, we're going to have lots to talk about as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
But before we go there, you graduated from Howard Law in 2007.
Correct.
I graduated in 2005. I was a couple years ahead of you. You were coming in as I was going out, but you have been one of the most, I'm going to say, for lack of a better term, popular people in the history of the law school. And that carries on even today. And you have represented the law school really well. Can you tell us?
And so have you.
Oh, thank you, my brother. I appreciate that. Can you tell us how you ended up at Howard, why you chose Howard, and what's your connection to Howard even to this day?
Yeah, I mean, Howard is the best thing to happen to me. I think besides my wife is the best thing to happen to me.
Good answer.
She gave me great kids and she's a wonderful person. But when I came out of college, I moved down here to D.C.
You're from Philadelphia.
I grew up in Philly, moved to New York in high school. Ended up graduating high school there. And
interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. And the reason why I moved is my father was a veterinarian and he worked for the federal government and he got transferred in my 11th grade.
Wow.
Which is crazy.
Oh, that's a tough time to leave.
Very tough time to leave. But we made the move. I grew up in Philly, but we made the move. And
so you only spent 2 years or so in New York.
Yeah. Until I was an adult and I went back to practice law. But yeah. Graduated and ended up going to a SUNY school, State University of New York. I actually was going to go to Georgetown. That's where I wanted to be.
Okay.
I was relying on a scholarship through my father's work, and that wasn't offered anymore. And
Georgetown is a lot of money.
A lot of money. Yeah. And we didn't have a lot of money. So we decided, my dad's like, well, we're in the state system now. We didn't know much about SUNY. It's funny, and I told my grandmother that I'm applying to Sunni schools, but she's a Shia Muslim, and she's like, "What do you mean Sunni?" And I'm like, "No, Grandma."
So just give us how controversial is that? Let's explain that. Sunni
it's not
Shia.
Controversial at all. Interestingly, my father is Shia and my mother is Sunni. So it can be controversial in parts of the world, in Pakistan and Iran, but. Anyways, we digress.
Yes.
I ended up going
We're
to this
multicultural show here, Lord. Hip Hop Happy Hour.
Yes. So I ended up applying to the only school in the SUNY system that had an international relations program because I wanted to do foreign policy. I wanted to be in D.C. That's why I wanted to go to Georgetown.
Right.
Ended up going there, met my wife freshman year.
Oh,
Kelly.
wow. Okay. Yeah. I did not know that.
Yeah. And it was a private white. It's not a private. I'm sorry. A public white institution.
Public white institution.
Very white.
He went right there right away. All right.
I mean, it's a small liberal arts school. It's quintessential college town. Only bars. That's all they have. But a great place. A great place.
You had a good experience there. You met your wife there.
I met my wife there. I had a great experience. But it was a predominantly white school. But 9/11 happened when I was there.
All right.
And
so September 11, 2001.
Correct.
What year were you?
I was a sophomore.
All right.
So that happened, and it was a seminal moment in my life because as a Muslim American, I went to that school and I just blended in like Rizzy does. Like I assimilated in. People, even though I looked brown, they just felt like I was just a darker white guy.
Right. And at Howard, you were just another black guy.
Exactly. And that's my reality.
That's how I look at you.
Yeah, that's become my reality, this chameleon. Because I'm brown, I guess I just kind of blend in wherever I go. But 9/11 happened, and at that moment, I was like, you know what? I need to be more outwardly Muslim. I need to represent my community because
Were you not doing that before that?
I don't think as much. I think I was more focused on trying to fit in, which is what young people do in every environment. And that's what I was doing, and I was doing great at it. But then 9/11 happened. People in my family were harassed because they looked Muslim. Right. I didn't outwardly look Muslim. I was just a brown guy.
Right. So you could have been any number of brown countries.
Exactly. And I ended up, becoming very involved on campus at my school, organizing a huge panel discussion days after 9/11 to kind of give people a reflection of the true Islam, because I felt like
that's really brave.
Yeah.
At that time, I can only imagine in New York, where the most horrific terrorist act in the history of the country, or recent memories anyway, happened, and you had the courage to get up and say, hey, I'm Muslim, and this is not who I am or we are as a people. There's billions of Muslims in the world. And obviously, if one or two people who happen to share the same religion as you do something horrific, it doesn't speak for anyone. I mean, I think that's obvious, but it needs to be said, right? I mean, how many things were done in the name of any religion? Horrible things. Christianity, one of them.
I think that's right. And my job, I felt, was to sort of represent a true representation of Islam, because Islam at its core means peace. So that's what I did. And at that moment, I think it kind of set in motion for me, which is, you were asking me about my story, where it's like, I have the ability through speech and through just advocacy to be an effective advocate.
Right.
And I think that's where I think my mind, whether intentionally or unintentionally, was like, I think law school is the next natural step.
I would agree with that, but it's interesting that you mentioned that your undergrad was a liberal white institution, public white institution, your words.
Right.
And you end up at the Mecca of
the Mecca,
a historically black college and university, Howard University. What a huge difference, right?
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
So, even though I went to this public white institution, when I got into SUNY Geneseo, which is regarded as which is the college I went to, regarded one of the better state institutions, like almost like an honors college type place.
Show off.
No, but it's become that. It's become, it's like our degrees have appreciated after we left.
Hey, I'm not mad at you, man.
Yeah. That's really what happened with me. But even when I was at Geneseo, I was part of a group where they intentionally put all the brown and black people in one group. The kids from the city.
Right.
So it was called the Transitional Opportunity Program.
Oh, yeah.
And I was in that program. And through that program, a legend, sort of pioneer in white public New York State public school system at higher education, a guy named Isam Firm, black dude from Brooklyn.
All right. Brooklyn NYC in the building.
Yeah, and he instilled in me the importance of Howard and what Howard represents.
Was he a Howard grad?
He was not, but he had gone to an HBCU. I think he went to A&T.
Oh, North Carolina A&T. Shout out to A&T.
To Aggies, right? Aggies?
Yeah, I think they are the Aggies.
But so I just was like, I want to be in DC. Howard's where it's at. Right. I went to visit Howard, and the rest is history.
Did you? Now, I have a similar story about visiting Howard the first time. It blew my mind, and I came from a historically black college university, Xavier University in New Orleans, Louisiana. But excuse me, when I went to Howard for the first time for the open house, did you go to the open house for your class?
I did.
Woo! It was.
Yeah, it was
game changer.
It really was. I mean, just the energy, the vibe, the immediate moment you get there and you just feel like you belong.
Exactly. It truly is a family.
Yeah.
And you don't even know anyone yet, right? And you are already accepted as family.
No, and it was incredible. And it's a testament to our relationship.
Right.
Like, you were 2 years prior to me. Just another way of saying you're older than me and I'm younger. but
I would take that. I would take that.
But you look great, brother.
You got some gray hairs in your beard too, brother.
I do. No, but the fact that you talk to other colleagues, I have a lot of partners that went to a lot of great law schools across the country.
Right.
Some of the best. They don't know upperclassmen 2 years ahead of them like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, that's a testament to Howard.
Howard is really a family, and it changed my life. I always talk about it. I always will talk about it. It literally changed the trajectory of my life. And we have a teacher, a mentor in common. You know what I'm about to say.
Bob
Fabricant, who we're still both very close with today. And he changed my life 100%. I give him all the credit in the world.
And important to say that, we talk about the importance of Howard and what Howard means to us. It should not be lost on anybody that Bob Fabricant is not an African-American man.
He's not. He's an older. No, he's not old. And I love him. Jewish man.
Yeah, and he's dedicated his career to that institution and bringing up people.
And he worked there for free, so I understand it, and volunteered all of his time, and still does, and has connected with so many other people there.
Great man.
So an African-American Christian, myself, a Philadelphia Muslim, you,
yes, sir,
and a Jewish guy from New Jersey are all very good friends.
Right. And
that's the way the world should be.
I agree. I completely agree. That we don't talk about current events, but that message can be taken around the world now.
That message can be taken up. Just the fact that you're here and we're talking about this man and our friendship with him and our friendship with each other, the world can learn from that. It should learn from that.
I agree. And Wu-Tang.
And Wu-Tang, exactly.
And Wu-Tang.
You jumping ahead of the...
I just can't look down at these records and not think Wu-Tang.
I know. It's coming, part 2. Everybody tune in to part 2 of this interview because it's coming. And this man's going to bring some knowledge, all right? So you're at Howard. You graduated 2007. What's your next move? What do you do after that?
So I was a summer associate at a firm in New York, my second summer. So as everybody knows, at least for the lawyers watching, when you do that job between your second and third summer at a firm usually or an employer, there's a chance if you do well, you're going to end up there in your fall.
That's for the smart people, okay? I never had that opportunity, all right? I also want to say, but, whatever.
No, but that's how it worked out for me. I ended up going to a firm called Anderson, Kill & a litigation firm in New York. When I was choosing between two different law firms for my summer that summer, it was between Reed Smith, Philly, which is where I grew up.
Wow, okay.
And Anderson, Kill & in New York. Reed Smith didn't have as much of a presence in New York to have a big summer class or anything like that. So I ended up going to Anderson Kill. I talked to my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and she's like, we should go to New York. I'm like, yeah, we got to go to New York.
Everybody should live in New York once in their life.
New York
right?
is an amazing place. So I ended up going there, got the job, was starting there right after I graduated, started there as a litigation associate at Anderson Kill.
So in 2007, in the fall.
In the fall. And within 3 weeks of being on the job, a litigation partner who I'm very close with still came up to me and says, Rizzy, we're going to get acquired by Reed Smith, and we're moving there, and we want you to come.
Okay.
And that's what happened. My first year, I moved to. So I tell people, Reed Smith wanted me so bad, they went and acquired another firm.
Exactly, man. Just so you could.
And now I'm an equity partner there. So you
nice.
know,
Woo, equity partner. Let's go. All right.
No, but it was a weird, fortuitous thing, and so I've been in and out of Reed Smith my whole career. I was there for 4.5 years in New York as a litigation lawyer, and then I left to clerk.
Now, clerking, for those of us who don't know, is mean you worked for a judge as the judge's right-hand man. Is that right?
Incredible judge, yeah.
Yes. Which judge did you work for? What district were you in? The federal, state?
I was in the federal court, the Honorable Sterling Johnson Jr., who is in the courthouse in Brooklyn, New York, where John Gotti was prosecuted.
Right, I do know.
Sterling Johnson Jr. is one of the greatest men of all time. African-American judge, appointed by George H.W. Bush before he was a judge. He was the special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York. So he started his career as a cop.
Okay,
Grew up in Bed-Stuy, ended up becoming a homicide detective, and decided to work nights in homicide, and got into law school and went to law school during the day. Graduated from Brooklyn Law School at the top of his class. Then was an AUSA in the Southern District of New York, a federal prosecutor. And I'm almost done with his history, but it's such an incredible story.
It needs to be told. This is where our elders need to be recognized.
Yeah, and he became the special narcotics prosecutor for the city of New York because, as you recall, during the crack epidemic, there was a problem in New York, and they needed a special district attorney to oversee drug prosecution.
And it was him.
It was him. And he, Mayor Koch appointed him. And if you've ever seen the movie American Gangster about Frank Lucas,
correct.
How Frank Lucas ended up flipping on the NYPD. Sterling Johnson was the prosecutor who got him to flip and was able to take down corrupt police officers that were part of the drug trade back in the 60s and 70s.
So you worked for him for how long?
A whole 1 year. Clerkships are a year term long, but he had a profound effect on my career. You and I being Howard people, there's a natural inclination because we're social engineers and we're trying to effectuate change with our license to, if you're going to think about criminal law, you're going to go the defense route. It's just a natural sort of feeling in that institution, and understandably so. But
you were a prosecutor.
No, and that's what I'm about to tell you. Judge Johnson was a prosecutor. And
as was I.
And one of the things he said to me, I'm like, Judge, I don't know what to do next. And he's like, Rizzy, you want to make an impact, right? You want to make an impact in the criminal justice system. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, one of the greatest things that you have, that the greatest powers to make an impact is prosecutorial discretion.
Because you have all of the power in the government side.
Yeah.
And we need good prosecutors. You and I never had the privilege of working together as defense attorney versus prosecutor, but you have a great reputation. I've talked to many colleagues, and even though you've been gone for a while, they still remember how fair you were. And that's so important. It can't be understated that we need people of color and people of diverse backgrounds in all jobs, but especially in the prosecutorial space.
I wholeheartedly believe that, and Judge Johnson's the one who conveyed that to me. And then I sat in his courtroom and observed 2 different trials, and I saw just the theater of trial. And I'll say this: I knew that going to a prosecutor's office, it was also going to get me immediate trial experience, and I'm a trial lawyer at my heart,
right? And
that's what I want to do. So it was an incredible decision, and I ended up going to the U.S. Attorney's Office in D.C. and then came, was there for 5 years almost, and then came back to private practice.
And you handled all kinds of cases, I'm assuming, from homicides. You started off in misdemeanors, is that right?
I did, right.
And you moved all the way up to handling homicides, which is the top of the food chain in the prosecutor's
and then
office.
For the last year and a half of my time at the U.S. Attorney's Office, I moved to the federal side of the office, and I was in the cybercrime section. So I was doing a lot of cyber intrusion, fraud, money laundering cases too. So it was quite fascinating. It was a great experience.
Being a trial lawyer is an amazing experience, and I highly encourage anyone who's interested in being a quote unquote stand-up lawyer, as Bob Fabricant used to tell us, to consider criminal law. because you can become rich like Rizzy at the end of the day too.
Yeah, right. I got kids, man.
Yes, don't we all? Right. That's
They're
where all the money
wonderful
goes.
kids, but-
Wonderful, but
Yeah.
yes, expensive.
Expensive.
So you're now in heavily entrenched in your firm in private practice, and you're an equity partner. Can you explain the difference between an equity partner and just a partner in general? We hear those terms all the time. What do they mean?
Yeah, I mean, it just depends on the firm. Various firms have an equity or non-equity component to their partnership, and what that really means is, if you're an equity partner, you own a piece of the firm, right? And but it comes with a lot more risk. It comes
Right.
with a lot more responsibility. But it's a recognition that you're an owner of the firm because you excel in your practice and you're profitable to your partners and the overall global partnership. And I'm thankful and blessed that I'm able to do that.
Absolutely.
But there are the non-equity component is it's there's salaried lawyers, which is the same as me, but I sort of partake in the overall wins and losses of the firm.
Right.
Right.
And you were in government for a while. So can you talk about your experience in government versus in the private sector and how comparing the two? I mean, you may or may not go back to government at some point in your career. You never know what the future holds, but you're a partner in a law firm, but you were at one point a government employee. So can you talk, although prosecutors, I mean, federal prosecutors in particular, work really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I know that you work hard now, but can you talk about, contrasting those two lifestyles and how they were for you?
Yeah, I mean, the way I'll contrast is so it's going to speak your language. It's, I was a prosecutor, I was a trial lawyer. I knew how to build cases, build investigation teams, run investigations, and then get to trial, and more often than not succeed in advocating for that victim and getting a guilty verdict. Now, when you take all of that and then you go to the defense side, you effectively, I'm not going to say the sausage, I'm Muslim, so I'm going to say I know how the kebab is made at DOJ or any number
Well,
of...
you learn the playbook. You do this long enough.
Yeah.
I know the government playbook pretty well at this point.
So that, I think it has, that experience as a prosecutor, not only was it a great job and an amazing experience, and representing the United States is a profound responsibility, and it's an awesome responsibility.
Right.
But now being on the defense side, I can provide real value to my clients because I understand how prosecutors approach investigations. What are the types of things they're looking at if there's a particular investigation, and the types of evidence that they're trying to establish in order to get an indictment. And, what is my job? My job is, as a corporate criminal defense lawyer, is when my cases make the news, that means I've probably failed, because I'm usually talking to the government when the grand jury investigation is ongoing, and I'm trying to convince them to decline prosecution and not proceed.
You have given me, I wasn't expecting to go here, but you have given me the perfect segue for my next topic, what I want to talk about. Before I do, I just want the audience to understand the difference between kind of your criminal defense and my criminal defense. You represent corporations as well as people, where I almost exclusively represent people, persons that come to me and have been accused of crimes, especially in the federal system, which is where my primary focus is. But I get them after it's already happened, right? Like they've already been charged, and then they come to see me, and then we go from there. Whereas, like you said, you are, if your cases come out in the news, you're maybe not failed, but it's not necessarily a good thing for your client. Your client doesn't want that exposure. So, segueing to the next topic, and I tend to stay away from current events on this show, but I just can't resist because you're such expertise in this.
So you want to talk about Taylor Swift?
Yes.
Isn't that the only thing in the news?
Is she going to marry Travis Kelce? Yes or no? P. Diddy, Sean Combs, also known as Puffy, has been in the news a lot lately. He has not been charged with any crime. He's innocent until proven guilty. He may never be charged with any crime. But you and I both know that when the federal government seeks a search warrant, that's quite a process. I want you to talk about that. And the fact that his homes were raided simultaneously has got a lot of people confused about what's going on. And the fact that he's not under arrest, So what you just said, when your clients know when their case is in the news and they're been kind of like outed, for lack of a better term, that's not a good thing. Can you just talk about your observations of what's going on? This is the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour.
Yeah.
Puffy's from our generation. Just what are you seeing? I know you don't have any, well, I don't know. You maybe have any specialized knowledge about what's going on in the case. You're just probably watching on the sidelines like most of us.
Yeah.
But you have a certain level of expertise, as do I. I want to just talk a little bit about what your thoughts are on what's going on.
I mean, I'll tell you as an advocate, as a criminal defense lawyer, I think so far the way it's been handled by whoever the investigation team is highly irresponsible.
How so?
To me, as you know, to obtain a search warrant that is going to be so public and so
requires a lot, right?
It requires a lot.
And
you have to.
What do you have to do to get a search warrant?
Well, you need to prepare. You need to have an agent prepare an affidavit, and detailed affidavit.
Detailed, and the level of detail in these federal search warrants is usually very high.
It's very high, and then you can bet that whoever is running the office that's investigating this knows, because of this individual being the target being a public figure,
right,
that it's going to bring immense scrutiny. And you know that federal judge or magistrate that looked at that affidavit, whether the U.S. attorney or whoever's leading the investigation, the FBI agent, was asked by the judge or not, they're walking in there with an expectation this better be airtight in order for this judge to sign off on this affidavit.
Because my experience doing mostly federal cases is that the evidence is the best of the best. Right. I used to do state prosecution as well as defense work, and it wasn't necessarily always there because the resources on the federal side are obviously so much more. But to me, when I look at two coordinated raids, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, literally happening at the exact same time, that speaks to a tremendous amount of resources and coordination and trouble.
And potentially evidence, right? Because when you're acting in simultaneously at two places in real time, that is a reflection that there was some evidence that there is an exigency here. And you need to get to whatever evidence that could be potentially destroyed or secreted, whatever they're going to do with it. So when you do it in such a public fashion, what I would expect is a quick reaction by the prosecution and the investigation team and proceeding with a case and becoming public with it. I
actually take a different perspective a little bit. I agree that everything you said, except at the end, we know that Sean Combs was not arrested. He was actually at the airport when this happened. Someone from his entourage was arrested and charged with some sort of a drug trafficking crime, but he was let go. And in my experience, a lot of the times in the cases that I have, that's right out of the federal playbook, is to not arrest the target, and the target is then sweating.
Totally. No, and I think that's what's going on here but it's just a very public way to make him sweat. You don't have to do it that way. And you don't have to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. And that's what is a little irresponsible to me. And it's character assassination. And, and that's my concern with how it's being handled. Now, to your point, how you segued here is that, I know I'm half an arm's length away from his defense team, and I know some of the players there, and I know how they were engaged in all of that. I'm not his counsel,
but it's no secret that this was coming in a lot of respects, right? I mean, his lawyers have most undoubtedly been in touch with federal authorities on some level.
Exactly, and the thing is, to our point, how we got here, which is his lawyers, I'm sure, are advocating in that pre-indictment grand jury posture and trying to mitigate against any evidence that may implicate him and hope that they can get this resolved.
So talk about what that is. There's a lot to unpack there. For those who may not know, what is an indictment?
So an indictment,
how do you get one?
So an indictment is a formal charging document that's used at the federal and state level, depending upon what state you're talking about.
It's the charges, right?
It's the charges. And effectively...
And how can someone be charged with any particular crime?
Well, at least in the federal system, a grand jury, which is a number of individuals, citizens, just like you see on Law and Order, you have a petit jury, which are the people sitting in the box while actual theater of trial is going on.
For the actual trial itself, right? That's the petit jury.
But there are individuals who get the same notice and summons in the mail to appear for grand jury duty.
Which is not a trial.
It's not a trial. They're basically in a room in a federal courthouse or a U.S. government building, like a Department of Justice building, and they're hearing cases all day. And what that means is they're having just the prosecutor and witnesses, mostly agents, coming in and presenting facts of
from their
crimes.
Perspective, right?
From their perspective.
And it's a secret proceeding.
Secret. No defense is permitted in there. And even if you're a represented witness, you can't have your lawyer in there. The lawyer can be outside the room, but not while you're testifying.
Right. So in order to build these cases, that's a perfect point that I want to stress. There are what's called represented witnesses. I've had many represented witnesses, of course, in my career.
I have, as if I, yeah.
And that means that you would receive a letter from the federal government saying, we want to talk to your client, Mr. X. Mr. X about whatever it is they want to talk to him about. Mr. X or Miss X will come in to be interviewed, and assuming they are okay with appearing before the grand jury, a lot of times you don't have a choice, but assuming that they don't have any self-incrimination,
Fifth Amendment
issue, they have to testify and talk about what the government's asking about. In that proceeding, the lawyer for that person, you or I, are not present. We may know what questions are going to be asked, but when they're actually asked, we're not in the room, and the grand jury and the prosecutor or the agent is, and that testimony is recorded and it's sealed, it's secret.
Right.
And that's some of the way that charges are brought and evidence is obtained, not necessarily evidence is obtained, but that charges are brought against a particular person. So we assume in this case, there are represented witnesses who have already given grand jury testimony. I don't know, but I would assume.
This case meaning Diddy's case.
Diddy's case,
yeah,
right. I would assume that there's people that have come forward already and said what they know or don't know. And the government at this point believes it has enough evidence to investigate what they think they have or what has been told to them.
Right. And I wouldn't be surprised if that search warrant was presented to a judge, it probably paraphrases, because usually when search warrants are submitted to judges, there's an affidavit and usually it's from an agent,
right?
A law enforcement agent,
FBI agent, Homeland Security agent.
But hearsay is permitted in that document. So that
hearsay is what?
It's an out of court statement offered for
the truth. Give me the lawyer answer of the truth of the matter.
But essentially, it's like not a sworn statement from that individual.
So I can say, yeah, Rizzy, he does all kind of stuff.
Right.
And they say, okay, we'll take that.
And I assume that affiant or that agent also references probably grand jury testimony and other things he's privy to about what people have said.
Right. Because the judges are not privy to the grand jury testimony. They don't know what's been said or not said. They just rely on the agent or to tell them under oath, this is what I know and this is what I've been told. Can you give me permission to search Mr. Combs's residences in Miami and California? And that's what happened. So, for me, it's interesting to see this all play out in the public space. And I worry that people, again, I don't have any specialized knowledge one way or the other about what's going on or what the allegations will be.
Yeah, neither do I.
About how it's being presented. I think if he were someone else, maybe it wouldn't be quite the way that it's been, if you don't understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't think this would be happening to Elon Musk.
Correct. And I don't know what, there may be some very horrific allegations or not. I have no idea.
And that's fine. The horrific allegations are not
they're allegations.
They're allegations. And you have an obligation as a prosecutor and a government to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And
that's what trial is.
That's what trial is. And at the end of the day, you have an obligation as a prosecutor and discretion to how you're going to approach your prosecution and your investigation. And sometimes you have to do it with some integrity without assassinating somebody before they have an opportunity to be heard and defend themselves.
Because that seems like that's what's going on now.
Right.
Now, I guess before we kind of finish talking about this, what's your opinion? Do you think charges will be brought eventually?
I'll be real with you. I don't know. I don't. I mean, the fact is, generally speaking, when you know the public nature of these two search warrants, you can expect there'll be charges. Right?
I do expect there to be charges.
Because they would not be doing something so public if they, one thing prosecutors don't like is having egg in their face.
Correct.
So I would suspect that there are going to be charges brought, but
but he hasn't been proven guilty of anything.
Nothing.
And he's not charged currently as of the date of this podcast.
Right.
But I do suspect that charges are forthcoming.
I think that's right.
And I think if I was a bet man, and I'm not, but I think a combination of human trafficking and drug charges are going to be part of that indictment.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case here. And the agents that made the raid and the HSI agents that are involved, I mean, there's a specific unit there that I used to work with when I was a prosecutor that are in the sort of sex trafficking space. So it's not surprising by the players that are involved here and the types of rumor allegations of where this may be going.
And I would assume that if this ever does make it to trial, that there will be a number of witnesses who have cut deals, which are in our world we know known as cooperating witnesses,
right,
to testify against Mr. Combs. And I know, like as you said, prosecutors don't like egg on their face, that many of those people have already probably been contacted and signed up at this point, at this juncture right now here today.
Right.
Because there's no way they're going to bring charges without that information from those people. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. I may weigh in on it again at some other point later on. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there won't be charges, but I don't think I am. I think.
Well, I guess for Diddy's sake, I guess that he hopes there won't be charges.
Right. He probably does.
Yeah.
But that's our one current event topic. The first time we've ever done so on a Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. But before we close out this section of our interview, man, I just wanted to really thank you for coming on and sharing your expertise. And we have a lot of law students that listen to the podcast, and they've heard kind of your progression. It seems like you've had a very steady upward progression. But can you talk about any difficulties that you've had on the way to kind of arriving to where you are at the pinnacle of your profession? I know it hasn't all been easy.
It hasn't. It's funny. I just was, and I'll quote something that I just was. There was a story that somebody on Law 360 did of me, which is reaching out to senior lawyers at firms and asked about, talk about your one aha moment that you recall in your career. And it's when I was a first-year associate or summer. I forget which one it was. It might have been when I was a summer. I was recruited from Howard by the only black associate, maybe there was two, at this firm that I went to, Anderson Kill, my freshman year, or my first year. And he recruited me from Howard, and I felt like a sense of loyalty to him because he brought me into the firm and vouched for me, and I did great. But one Friday night in our summer program where we were scheduled to go out for a summer event, right? Like, I don't know, something in New York. I don't know what it was. He assigned an assignment to me earlier that day.
Okay.
I worked on the assignment, and admittedly, I mailed it in. Like,
You didn't give your all.
I didn't give it my all. And we get to later in the day, he calls me. He's like, "Can you come to my office?" Which I knew something was up.
Right. And never like that kind of phone call.
My stomach dropped. He's like, "Close my door." And I go and sit with him, a guy I really look up to. And he goes, "What you gave me is like unacceptable." And he's like, "I'm telling you this because I recruited you from Howard." He's like, "You and I, we got to work harder in this place. And if you don't exhibit excellence in everything that you do, you're not going to succeed here." And he's like, "I think you can succeed here, and you can succeed beyond here." That was like a really pivotal moment in my
because
career.
That's something that we talk about as people of color all the time.
Right.
The fact that you have to work twice as hard as someone who's not of color. And, that's just the way it is. People, whether they like to hear that or not. And it brings me to like an interesting point that I hear you when I hear you speak is, how do you feel? How have you felt being what I'm assuming is one of only a few people of color in this corporate law world that you're in?
No, I mean, I think that moment that I'm talking about and how it changed me and how I stayed up all night that night, finished that assignment, crushed it, and never looked back. And that's how I approached every facet of my career since, which is strive for excellence. I am the minority. I represent many behind me and many that came before me. But to your question, I feel like I have an obligation as
Do you think it's fair that we have to represent for our entire cultures?
It gets tiring. So yeah, maybe it's not fair, but
it is what it is.
It is what it is. We deal with the cards we're dealt, but at the same time, thanks to the sacrifices of so many others, including through our institution, the Howard University School of Law,
Yes, sir.
Our struggle is not as hard.
Oh, we have it very easy compared to people who came
Right.
before us.
So I use the opportunity. It's a blessing to be an advocate, to do exactly what I did when I made the decision to go to the prosecutor's side. Was like, I want to use my perspective and who I am and my pedestal, and amongst my mostly partners who don't look like me and my law colleagues who don't look like me, to represent excellence. I'm a great lawyer. I just happen to be a Howard alum.
Exactly.
I'm not a Howard alum who's a good lawyer, who happen to go to Howard. You know what I mean? Like, to me, that's important.
That's very well said, man. And I don't think I can end it on a better note. Rizzy, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm proud of you, man. This is excellent.
Hey, man, look, just tell all your fancy friends to keep coming on and
we got you
getting the exposure that I really want the world to see. People like you and me, and inspire them to do better than us.
I agree.
Thank you for coming on, my brother.
Thank you for having me, brother.
Thank you for joining us on this month's segment of the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. Please follow the podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel at the Lawyers Hip Hop Happy Hour. I'll see you next month. Catch you on the B-side.